let's get on with it. First up on my list, I have the Access, Education and Participation officers, the undergraduate candidates. God, we need to shorten the name of that. So Lily and Neve, if you care to make your way to the interrogation station.
I'll get in first.
Please,
Yeah, take a seat. I won't bite, I promise. God, you're all alarmingly prepared. Welcome to Cambridge,
I
everyone.
brought a pen.
I've got one flashcard.
Yeah, nice.
Oh, it's considerably more than I've done to prepare for this. So, yeah, if you'd like to take a minute to introduce yourselves, take us through your major policy points, reasons to vote for you, and then we'll move on to questions that have been pre-submitted and then open to the floor. So, Lily, if you'd like to grab the mic and go first, you get your minute of glory.
Hi, I'm Lily, third year student, HSPS student at Peterhouse. I am state comprehensive student, bursary, first gen to uni. I came into Cambridge thinking, let's widen participation, let's make things, I really came in with a desire to jump straight into access work and to make things better because I really did not have a smooth ride getting into Cambridge. I did access work for a while, but I was also in my first year really encountering that typical phrase of access does not end at admissions. Me and my peers were battling that. So I kind of took a step away from access work and spent sort of second and third year doing things a bit more sort of community, but still education and participation based, such as the Rent Strike campaign, founding the Cambridge Period Project, and being on WUMCAM. I believe, and now I've come back with a renewed passion to look at access, education and participation together, and I have a really huge drive to want to tackle these things together with an understanding that access really does not end at admissions. We need to transform the way we think about education at Cambridge to make things inclusive, to make things accessible and welcoming and engaging for everyone, to make this an environment that people can actually thrive in and that are actually able to get into and then thrive in. In terms of, how long do I have left?
About negative 30 seconds, but...
to wrap this up, that's what my policies focus on, actually transforming the way that we talk about access and education as something that works together. Yeah.
Like Lily, my name's Neve. I'm Medward's third year historian. Like Lily, state comp, bursary, all of that good stuff. And I believe that access and education are fundamentally linked. I've spent a lot of time doing access work as Medward's access officer. I wrote the bill that put a Class Act officer on the Medward's JCR, and I'm now the Class Act undergrad president and welfare officer. In both of these roles, all of these roles, I've focused on transparency, financial aid and admission statistics specifically. In both of these, it's crucial that the university is held accountable, and without transparency, there's nowhere to go, really. So that's one of my main focuses. As far as education goes, I'm focused on accessibility, lectures, faculty buildings, exams. Maintaining alternative exam arrangements, I think, is a big issue, and lecture recordings. Some of my lectures have gone straight back to in-person, still no longer recorded, which is mental. Communication is important to me. Access officers, faculty reps, academic reps. I want to make sure that they're all included in any discussion that the SAB team are having. And finally, I'm a history student. Decolonisation is so important, a central discourse in my degree. And I want to extend this to all subjects because it's about time that all curriculums are decolonised. Is that a minute?
Some of you have a very interesting interpretation of the length of 1 minute, but I'll allow it. Gotta fill the time somehow. Okay, so we'll move on to the pre-submitted questions, which we definitely did not make up in the half an hour before we started. So both of you have spoken quite both of you have spoken quite extensively about your experience and what would make you suitable for the role. So what are you proudest of so far in your work as an officer, and how would you make the most of your current successes? So Neve, if you'd like to answer first.
Do I have a time limit?
Probably.
Brief.
I mean, probably. If I could remember what it was off the top of my head, I'd tell you.
It's a minute.
It's a minute. Okay, then. We've got to fill the time somehow.
Cool. I'm 100% proudest of running for Class Act president, because we didn't have a president, we didn't have any presidents forever. It was a whole mess. Some of you will know the ins and outs of it. But under my leadership as president, Class Act had its first term card in about a year, its first social in about a year, and its first ever Class Act Officer Forum, like about a week and a half ago. And I'm so proud of like the discussions that I've had with my community. I'm proud that we've managed to build a better community that I've felt more a part of than ever. And I'm actually running off to Class Act Forum after this, so I'm still doing all that stuff. But yeah, no, I felt very proud of that, and that's been like just the last term, so yeah.
I'd say there's like two things on par that I'm proudest of.
I'll allow it.
I'd say first one is founding the Cambridge Period Project, because this is something that whilst obviously focusing on like specifically menstrual access, I feel like represents the issues that we face not only like as a community but like within the university. Like we've really had to battle through like university bureaucracy, and still are, and in order to get something that like really should be a basic like need, is a basic need, and I think that's really emblematic of like how things are at the university. And I'm also like particularly proud of that because we're not just focusing on the university, we're focusing on like Cambridge as a community as a whole, which I believe is like very should be centred in everything we do, within that. And the other thing I would say is rent strike, because I feel like that's fostered like a really strong sense of community, and we did get wins from it, and I also feel like it laid a lot of groundwork to continue to like lobby for like fairer fees and more transparency from colleges regarding fees and rent.
Cool, thank you both very much. So you have mentioned various sort of schemes that you've helped to set up or to implement. There are quite a few access schemes run by the former CUSU, like CamSpire and Target Schools, that haven't been able to be run by the SU in recent years. Would you want to commit to their reintroduction? So Billy, if you'd like to go first this time.
I think one key point, one point on my manifesto was about making sure that the shadowing scheme is very sort of airtight and has longevity built into it. And I think definitely introducing as many schemes as possible. I think we can be ambitious with what we want to do. We can put out as many we can work on as many of these things as possible, and I would 100% commit to that, because different things are going to reach different people when you're talking about access. So 100%.
Yeah, I agree. I think, for me, one of the most confusing things about accessing Cambridge is all of the individual charities, and they're all doing brilliant work, but none of them are centralised. So some people are doing something with this charity, and it's all over your Facebook page, and you're like, which one's the best one? So stuff like CamSpire and Target Schools, I think, is really important to reintroduce. On my manifesto, I also mentioned the the alternative prospectus, which I haven't seen loads of in the last year, and I'd like to bring that back as a place for information about funding at different colleges and stuff like that.
Thank you. So we've got a couple more of the very definitely pre-submitted questions. If you could change one thing about assessment at Cambridge, other than the fact of it being assessment at Cambridge, what would it be? Neve, if you'd like to once you've...
Sorry. I would say... I'd like to see the changes that have been implemented in the last couple of years stay. I don't know if that counts as a change, but I would like to see more flexibility in terms of online exams, open book exams. I'm a historian. Open book exams are common sense. And I'd like to see just more consideration in the whole process generally, because I know that it's very difficult and opaque trying to get help for these sort of things when you're trying to email your tutor and then your tutor's saying something different to your DOS, and I'd like to see it sort of centralised, like I say quite a lot in my manifesto.
I think for me it would be about actually giving student bodies the choice, and like one of my manifesto points is about like instead of having a sort of performative like student voice, like departments should, you know, everyone has this like idea of like how alternative assessments like could be incorporated and like have been throughout the pandemic, but like not to the extent that students have wanted to see, and like are getting reversed so easily. And like I would change that, like departments actually give students an actual voice, not just this like performative voice, and then yeah, that would be the choice. And yeah, if that makes sense.
Yeah, getting the gist. Thank you both very much. So we'll open up to any questions from the floor. Stick a hand up. Oh, people are actually engaging. It's the first time for everything. You and the jumper over there.
Hello, yes. I'm not sure how many people in this room would remember the New Suit referendum, but one of the things that those of us who defended a no vote were arguing at the time was that AEP, as a role design, was smooshing together access and education in a way that would be negative for both of them. And I think given especially now that there's no PG AEP candidates, I think the risk is definitely run that one or the other gets sidelined in defense of the first. And the varsity work, have editorially decided just to call this access officer, which I was really disappointed when I saw. So the question I'm asking is, how will you ensure that, especially in the absence of a PGAAP, that access and education will both get their proper place within this role and within the actions that you take with your manifesto?
Lily?
First of all, like, I actually don't know if there's going to be a by-election for, I presume there will be, but like in terms of access and education and participation together, I do believe that they are completely interrelated and causal. You don't feel disengaged, or like you don't feel like you feel disengaged from your education and your learning because of things that mean that, like, because of if access doesn't continue past admissions. So like I feel like I'm coming at this role with an understanding of that. For example, like widening participation, for example, like for more disabled students to apply because they're underrepresented at Cambridge, in comparison to the wider like body of, like in the comparison to the national picture, like that's an access issue. But then in terms of education, if departments don't continue to like actually have that provision of like of hybrid teaching, which is an education issue, like that's something that's continuous. But I also would have that understanding of like the nuance of like they are things that should both have like huge amounts of attention put onto, but it is something that is, in my opinion, causal and should be tackled like together.
I totally understand your concern, because obviously I'm coming at it from an access perspective, an access background. But I spent some time talking to the lovely current AEP, who came at it from an education side, the academic rep side. And I've done my research. I've been endorsed by an academic rep, the lovely Anna. And I, like Lily, I completely agree that they're linked. I said so, I say so in my manifesto, but I'm very committed to speaking to academic reps who know what they're talking about because they've been elected by their faculty, by their department. And I like Lily agree that they're related, and that access issues inform education issues, and that accessibility is an education issue. But I understand that they're separate, and my solution to that is to listen and to learn, and I learn fast and I care about this issue, so I think I can do it.
I'll pinch that for a moment. Thank you very much. I saw another question in a sort of general that way direction. Marina, I'd absolutely back myself to throw this to you, but I think that's generally frowned upon, so Kate's on her way over.
I'll catch it. How do you guys envisage your role kind of interacting with the strikes of UCU members?
Yes.
Strikes are obviously an access and an education issue. I think it's crucial that obviously the SCU and the SABs and the AEP all support the strikes and are committed to helping academics and get better working conditions, because obviously an academic's working conditions are our learning conditions, and so they're intrinsically linked. I think the AEP should and the SAB team should always represent the interests of the students, and obviously the interests in the students with regards to the strikes are diverse. We are committed to supporting the strikes, I know, as an SU. But I would just love to have more conversations with UCU, because I haven't been involved in that as much in my time. But I think sort of obviously publicising, being on the picket lines, the absolute basics really are crucial, and I think underrated sometimes in roles like this.
I feel like in terms of this role, I would wholeheartedly support UCU strikes and explain it, whilst obviously understanding that students often feel education is being missed because of the strikes. I would want to explain and use this role as a platform to explain why the strikes are in the interests of the students, because as Neve said, without better working conditions, better stability and contracts for workers, we just won't get a better education. And also the pay gaps are something that I feel on a level everyone would agree there shouldn't be a gender pay gap, but then when it comes down to strikes, people sort of have a sort of different perspective on that. So I feel like it would be really useful to use the platform of this role to properly support UCU and support the strikes, I would say.
I was going to say a thing that has completely slipped my mind, so it can't possibly have been that important. I think I saw another hand up also, or multiple. Elia, since you're conveniently sat next to Marina. Kate, holding the microphone.
So my question is that obviously both access, education and participation are obviously can be impacted on or your identities and intersectionality. They're very intersectional issues. For example, both Black British students and students with mental health conditions face significant awarding gaps compared to other students. How do you envisage a way forward to tackle those sorts of awarding gaps and general intersectional issues that with access and access, education and participation?
There's already been a lot of stuff done by the Cambridge Centre for Teaching and Learning that's put a lot of pledges in place with regards to awarding gaps, and a lot of student groups have already worked really hard on this, and now I feel it's about actually holding the university to account to implement these pledges, and I believe that I have the drive to properly hold the university to account and not turn up to somewhere if they haven't said if they haven't done what they said they're going to do on a particular committee. Aside from that, things that maybe I would want to introduce, I feel like a really fundamental part is about the transition to Cambridge life, and so I put on my manifesto about introducing study skills workshops. There's already like a lot of study skills sort of supervisors dotted around Cambridge, and I feel like having these like as not just like a sort of daunting thing of like you can go to this study skills workshop, like having that as like sort of integrated a lot more into the way that like teaching and learning happens, and also alternative teaching methods such as like more sort of collaborative and like seminar based teaching, which has been like something that's really positive feedback to have come out of the pandemic. I feel like stuff like that should be maintained as something that like has been proven time and time again to be something that actually helps like learning. But yeah, I think just holding the university to account, especially on those pledges and with regards to that, yeah.
Obviously 100% agree. In terms of holding the university to account, transparency, like I say, admission statistics, especially the thing that has bugged me the most in my access work, not directly related to your question, is the refusal of the university and colleges to differentiate between state comp and grammar schools in their admission statistics, because obviously it's a big difference. So transparency in terms of holding the university to account. Without these proper statistics, these proper breakdowns of admissions, we can't know for sure if the university are delivering on their pledges. And again, building on what Lily said, I know that some colleges are starting to implement sort of class act student transitional skills workshops. So Clare College, I believe, is doing that once they send out their offers and stuff like that this year, which I think is brilliant. But I'd love to see that work centralised and run by the SU, as I would with a lot of things. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I thought I saw another hand. Yeah?
Thank you. So this is kind of related to something that Lily mentioned in her opening speech, but it's obviously very relevant to both candidates. I wanted to ask how you both envision making teaching and learning more inclusive, engaging and welcoming. Like, what would you do?
That's a big question. It's a good question. I think keeping hybrid teaching is important. Having both like in-person and online teaching is far more inclusive. I think, again, study skills, I'm sorry to steal your manifesto point, but you're right. Making these things available to everyone. And again, I'm a history student. There's a lot of discourse around the name of our library at the moment, thinking about these small symbols that make Cambridge, well, not small, but these symbols that make Cambridge seem less welcoming to people, because, you know, X college keeps a plaque to a person who made their money at slave trading. X college doesn't have accessible access to cheap accommodation, that sort of thing. Yeah, keeping teaching and learning hybrid, keeping teaching and learning sort of chatty, relaxed. I'm a humanities student. This is kind of common sense to me. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said, but I feel like, especially like with things such as decolonisation, like students shouldn't have to be fighting just to get like an alternative reading list built. It should be like something that's completely integral to the course structure itself, and like, again, this kind of fits in with like in terms of making teaching and learning like inclusive and yeah, like more welcoming, and like, for example, like the UCU like demands would mean that like not to do this like whole cliche like old white men thing, but like it would literally mean that people other than like old white men would have more of a chance of like sort of formulating these courses and stuff. And yeah, it wouldn't just sort of be like an additive sort of response. It should never be like, these things should never be like an additive response. It should be coming from like centrally within teaching and learning. And as I said, like again, yeah, this kind of like collaborative sort of seminar approach as like an option, like this is, people have given their feedback that this is like what students want. So like, why is it fair that like the university gets to sort of like turn it back just because we're like moving out of the pandemic, when we could really be moving forward to a very like transformed university. Sorry.
Okay, thank you both very much. So I'll give you your final minute to round off, give us your final. We've got another one.
Who's going first?
Yeah, go ahead.
I deeply care about access, education and participation. I see the flaws and the problems of this university as something that like there is enough passion to fight against from like the student bodies, whether it's like SLOs, people involved in access work. And I feel like it's about targeting like the way that we actually tackle these issues. I feel like my manifesto shows that there's like a broad range of ways that we can do this, like practically expanding access to more people, and then bringing that in so people don't just have to assimilate, so that they can actually feel like at home within Cambridge, not just like within the community and sort of like in terms of finances, but also very much within like teaching and learning. And yeah, I believe I have the drive and like the sort of like skills necessary to accomplish what I've put on my manifesto.
Yeah, I hope I've also shown that I'm really passionate about this work. I knew I wanted to focus on access from the second I stepped into Cambridge, and as I've spent more time immersing myself in this work, in this community, I've always learned to check my own privilege, to spend time thinking about others, and to always like be willing to accept that I'm wrong and to learn. And I learn quickly, and when something's important to me and to my community, I take it seriously and I don't really forget about it. I think I have the qualifications, I think I have the experience, and I think I have the drive to make the changes that I say in my manifesto. My priorities are transparency, accessibility, decolonisation and communication. And I chose these because of the time that I spent talking to the people doing the work that I care about in the university right now, and also people that want to see change within the SU itself. So obviously on my manifesto I've got a lot of things, so I'll be busy, but you know, if elected, I think I'll be busy doing things that are very important to this uni.
Brilliant, thank you both very much. I, like Heretic, am obligated to remind you that Ron is also a candidate. Please don't make us run another one of these.
Don't make us run another one.
Oh, no, pun. I will not have puns. Sit down. Okay, so next up we have the candidates for the University Councillor role. So please make your way to the interrogation station when you're ready. Now, as these guys are liable to be the politicians in the room, I will remind them of the precise definition of 1 minute, which is in fact 60 seconds. Sam Carling is unable to be with us this evening for reasons, so has sent us an introductory video. Yeah, go ahead. The wonders of technology. I'm an archaeologist. If I had it my way, it would have best be coming in by carrier pigeon, and at worst be carved on a stone tablet.
Right, it comes in 2 parts, so...
Hi there, sorry that I can't be at Hustings in person today. Unfortunately, I'm having some trouble with my back that's limiting the distance that I can travel. But my name's Sam, I'm a second year Natsky at Christ's, and I'm really passionate about empowering students to have an impact on our university, which is what's motivated me to stand in this election. So I'm the JCR president at Christ's, which means I sit on Christ's College Council, and I'm also on the council of the School of Biological Sciences, because I'm an academic rep. So I'm used to the kind of work that these councils do, and I'm used to sort of cutting past the delaying tactics that they use to usually block students from making real changes. I want to make the point that I'm not a political candidate. I'm on the exec of Cambridge University Labour Club, but I've also been endorsed by the Liberal Association for this position, which I think kind of demonstrates that I'll be someone that will work for all students and I'll put students' priorities above ideology. I have a track record of delivering for students. So at Christ's, just this year, I've achieved a real terms rent cut for rents going forward into next year through negotiations. And I think that kind of demonstrates I know how to get things done. And I'm unafraid of asking difficult questions to hold people to account. And I know sort of we hear this term, holding people to account, quite regularly. And what that actually means really is asking them the difficult questions to force them to sort of justify what they're doing. And then if they're not able to justify what they're doing, then they're going to have to change tack on that. So I'll just talk for a little bit about the sort of plans and policies I've got on my manifesto. So the first thing that I'm really keen on is to make university governance more transparent, because there are so many committees, it's really opaque, and most college fellows don't know how university governance works. So, how are students expected to? And what I really want to do is to produce a guide to governance that will lay out all the different committees, who has responsibility for what, the different tracks issues take, lay them out in a really accessible way that gives activists the tools they need to know where the pinch points are in processes and what they can do to overcome them. I want to look at tackling rents university-wide, and that's not really within the remit of the University Council, but what we have to recognise is that whoever wins this election will have a broader voice than just their voice on that committee, and it will give them a way of resolving issues at the intercollegiate level as well, which is something I really want to work on. I want to make sure there's meaningful climate action. I think the university is genuinely committed to fighting climate change, but at the moment it's setting lots of distant future targets, and really what we need is action right now. I understand that there are lots of issues. So for example, we're working on decarbonisation in Christ at the moment, and the costs are absolutely staggering. And of course, it's very easy for the university to see costs like that and just reduce the priority of climate action. But what I want to do is take the solutions that are being developed to these problems at college levels, the ones sort of that I'm working on in my other roles, and sort of apply that to the university level and say, look, can we scale this up? I think I've run out of time to talk about my other priorities, but I'm more than happy to engage with any questions if you'd like to contact me.
Is it on?
Yeah, it should be.
Sorry, my laptop's kind of like a walking propaganda tool for my beliefs anyway, so I feel like that's kind of going to show up. So I actually run the Labour Club, which Sam Carling is part of. Fun. I think, actually, ironically, I've become really disenfranchised with it. Not the Labour Party, obviously, but more the kind of role of student politics in the university as a whole. I think it's a really difficult way to get things done. I've tried to organise stuff. Like, I tried to get a presence on the picket lines. We had like 3 people show up max, including me. It's just like a really tough way to get stuff happening. I would say in terms of divestment campaigns, I tried to run something within my college at Queen's. Impossible to get through kind of the environmental committee. I couldn't even speak to the bursar. It was just really, really hard. So I think that this kind of thing, I've been campaigning for this sort of thing for a really long time. They're like a really fruitless level. So yeah, essentially I kind of want to expand what I've already been doing. I kind of think the state of the world more broadly kind of speaks for itself in terms of what my priorities ought to be. Like, literally the recent news, demilitarisation really ought to be at the top of our list of priorities. Divestment, I mean, look at it, like the natural world is literally crumbling around us, we're not doing anything. I know that's one of your priorities as well. But in terms of just kind of looking at what we've got, obviously I support the strikes, I've already mentioned that, but what Lily was saying earlier about kind of widening participation as being a really important part, kind of linking in with the strikes, so a kind of wider range of academics is going to bring it in a wider range of students, and I think that's really important. That's probably all I've got time to say, probably beyond, but yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Rory McCall. I'm first year economist at Jesus. So if I got this role, I would run I would support three sort of main areas. So that's welfare, environment and equality. So I'm going to start with the environment one. So I would support the SU's manifesto for a fossil-free university. I think this is such an important issue, and I've seen this through working with Cambridge Climate Justice. I tried to push forward also the divestment promises to 2030, as well as the including the divestment from arms as well, which was already mentioned. And I'd also try and extend the education about climate change, trying to include it into the research as well as the teaching around the university. So in terms of welfare, this is including like student mental health and just general student life. So I guess one of the focuses of this would be to support the U-Bus campaign for Girton and Homerton, which I think would definitely make their student life more equal to a lot of the other experiences around the other colleges. I'd also try to, something which I'm quite passionate about, ensure that all students have storage and access to housing, especially international students, and then also a college service for the prevention of suicide and mental health, and extend this and spend more on this. And then the last thing, in terms of equality, so I tried to promote and support implicit bias training, as well as teaching in Freshers Week and for academics and student-facing staff. And I'd also try to support the extension of bursary schemes, especially for master's students. And so yeah, those are my three main focuses. And yeah, I think, is that 3 minutes? Oh, just 1 minute.
Okay, so we'll open up to questions from the floor. I'll save the pre-submitted ones for afterwards. Just so everybody is aware, since Seb can't make it this evening, we will be sending the questions on to him to give him an opportunity to respond as well. So stick a hand in the air if you've got anything to ask. Oh, the enthusiasm. Come on, come up with something. Don't make me carry you all. Yeah, go for it.
How will you deal with accountability given the UC's confidentiality?
Can you do it with the microphone so we can make sure everyone can hear?
Sorry, yes. How will you deal with accountability given the UC's confidentiality policies? Sorry, I know I've asked you personally this question as well, and a slightly different variation, more specific, but just generally, like confidentiality policies, how do those interact with ensuring you're accountable to students?
Yeah, if you'd like to go first.
Yeah, so I understand it is a bit of an issue, and so I try to stay in communication with students through setting up an email account for the university counsellor, so that students could converse with this. I tried to get a gauge on what student views are on issues, current issues, through things like varsity, through information coming through the SU meetings. And then obviously there's no sort of system of formal accountability, but I try to stick to what the student views are and also be open to changing my own views. You know, I need to be representative of the student views, not just what I believe. So if those are changing, then I try to stay accountable to them. And I guess it's just based on trust and trying to stick to student views.
I mean, the views that I'm running with are my own, so it would be kind of completely counterproductive for me to go against what I believe. So if I were voted into this position, I would be voting on council in my own interest as well as in the interest of people who voted for me, because they're genuinely things I, completely believe in. But I also think that if you walk down the street, 20% of the days you're here, there's going to be some sort of strike action, some sort of protest outside Senate House. You kind of get a gauge of what's important to students. Obviously, things like student newspapers are important. I think SU campaigns are important, listening to particularly access representatives of different kinds, but kind of taking feedbacks from JCRs, which I know is a big thing for Sam, but very much like engaging with the student body, but also kind of just looking around and seeing what kind of makes sense, which for me is obviously the policies that I've already outlined.
Thanks both. Any further questions? Elia? You're becoming my go-to. It's a dangerous position to be in.
So this is, I suppose, more to one camp than the other. So this is about the manifesto kind of point on like student life and mental health. So one of the policies or things you wanted was a quick but safe return to post-COVID university life with in-person lectures and events. Obviously this is great for some students, but for a lot of students this isn't. Like the university life beforehand wasn't accessible or great, and a return to how it was beforehand won't be great either. So how will you kind of take into consideration students where like that, like for example, in-person lectures might not be the best thing?
Eve, if you'd like to go first.
Yeah, sure. I mean, like looking at what's been happening recently, I think hybrid stuff's actually been working surprisingly well. I mean, I don't go to lectures, but I watch my lectures online when they're relevant to the thing that I'm doing. But I think that obviously for some students, lectures are much more important than others. But I literally just shouldn't have said that. So yeah, lectures are obviously really important, things like that, but I think also in terms of in-person events, like I've been mentally ill in the past, and I think that it is a thing where you kind of don't necessarily want to pull yourself out of bed and go to like a team building event because that's meant to be good for your mental health. So I guess it's in terms of, I mean, it feels like kind of coming up with policy on the spot, but just creating, I guess, more online stuff is always good, but also being stuck on your laptop all day isn't great. I guess it's a variety. Yeah, essentially what I was saying earlier about hybrid stuff. So if you're doing a coffee morning, having a kind of a Zoom call to go alongside whatever is always a nice thing, but I don't know how far that kind of plays into what we could actually do on University Council, aside from making sure that the university like keeps hybrid learning going beyond the pandemic, actually.
So yeah, it would definitely sort of not a return to true normality, but a return to like a new normality. So obviously there's stuff that has been really bad about COVID, and there's stuff that I feel like we can learn through the universities, such as hybrid learning, a better support systems. So I guess learning from the problems that we've had to overcome and incorporating the good parts of that, and as we move on, removing the bad parts of that, such as social distancing and less in-person events if people wanted them. So yeah, I guess it's a new normality as opposed to like return to the old.
Thank you very much. So your manifestos obviously cover what you want to support, but I think I and everybody else will be interested to know what your strategies are for actually making progress with these where others have not necessarily been able to.
So in terms of the environment one, I'd work with the groups around Cambridge and sort of support them if they're bringing a motion to the University Council, speak to them, speak what they want to have emphasised so that it's coherent, and things like the UBus campaign as well, speak to them, work with them, which I don't think has really been done before, and just ensure that like all of the policies and what I'm saying and what they're saying is coherent so that it makes sense and it's a strong argument. So I feel like that would really have a big impact on the decision-making process.
I guess what's kind of interesting about University Council is that, like, to some extent it's unpredictable. Like, things are going to come to council that you weren't expecting, or you have to form views on things that you didn't necessarily know that you had views on. I guess, like, obviously I have a very strong sense of what's right and what's wrong, so that to some extent people are voting for that if they're voting for me. But also, I guess in terms of bringing things to council yourself, like I'm very used to bringing things to a committee that aren't popular with that committee and trying to get them through, as with my student politics role. But also like kind of in terms of making sure that I actually don't have anything further to say. Thank you. Sorry, I don't know where this is going.
Got too many of them now.
Sorry, how's Sam getting these questions, and when will his answers be?
Good question.
I'm writing a list of questions they're asked, and I'm going to send it when the questions are finished.
Kate's writing a list. Going to send them when the questions are over. Greta, you're right.
Yeah,
Out of time. Do we have a closing statement from Sam?
That was it.
Okay then, in which case if you'd like to take a minute to round off, give us your final spiel, then yeah, go for it.
Do you want to go first? Or?
Yeah, sure.
Go for it.
I mean, I think my campaign is mostly about seeing Cambridge as like having the capacity to do really important things globally. Like, Cambridge has massive impact through its reputation, and the fact that it's managed in an unethical way means that people see it and go, oh well, it must be fine. Like, Cambridge does loads of research into like fossil fuels, so the fact that they don't want to divest for ages means that we don't have to either. There are lots of people who would argue that kind of BP funding projects which are looking into renewable energy make it okay, but it clearly doesn't. Like, BP is an inherently bad company. We always cut ties with them because our tie to them is an endorsement. So that's my firm belief. I think things like that, where we can have massive impacts on demilitarisation, on divestment, but then also within the university on student-staff relations and the rights of each of those groups are the most important things we've got to do. Thank you.
So yeah, I guess a vote for me, I would be able to passionately bring forward quite a few of these issues which are incredibly important to both the university and the wider world and the wider country. So obviously already mentioned the environment. I'd further the work of Cambridge Climate Justice and other groups like also the arms groups and the workers' justice groups, and really pressure the university with a new perspective and I guess fresh eyes on the issue, and be able to commit quite a lot of time to putting pressure on them.
Thank you both very much. So I'll take the opportunity to remind you that both Sam Carling and Ron are also options for this election. Sam's manifesto is available on the SU website. Ron, in a classic move, has failed to submit one once again. We'll take a short 15-minute break now. A reminder, if you haven't signed in at the door, please go scribble your name down. Go have a nap, run a marathon, whatever it is you people do in 15 minutes.
When you're ready.
Hi everyone, it's lovely to be here. My name's Daisy, I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a third year at Robinson College. I've spent the last 3 years working either on my JCR, in SU campaigns, or in grassroots organising groups, campaigning on issues that really affect the student body. I believe that this university needs increased structures of preventative care that consider material student needs. We should foster an attitude of collective care among our community, in the university, the city, and beyond. We need to increase the welfare support given to struggling students, particularly to those so often neglected by our systems. But crucially, we need to embed proper preventative structures of welfare that change the culture of this university to prevent students from reaching breaking point. Our university must also be held responsible for its role in shaping the city's community as well as the national one. From housing to climate justice, it's essential that we shape the community we want, even outside of the university's walls. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. So we have one question that was submitted before by one Meg Driver, who I will like to invite to speak now, if she is present. It does not appear to be the case. I will ask it for her in her place then. How will you address the issue of alcohol harm, including drinking culture and addiction among students, and support for those affected by parents' loved ones' addiction?
Yeah, thank you. That's such a good question. This falls well within a lot of the other welfare policies I've outlined, so providing support for students who are already struggling through increased in changing the tutorial system so students actually have people they can go and speak to, through implementing wellbeing officers and increased funding for things like QCS, etc. But also on a preventative level, I know that there's a lot of amazing campaigns in Cambridge that work on alcohol harm, and I think the first port of call would be to meet with those students and to hear how they're campaigning on it and how, in the sabbatical role, I could best support what they're campaigning on.
Thank you. I will now open to questions to the floor. I believe we have a question over there.
So you've spoken a bit about the welfare part of the role, so I want to focus a bit on the community bit of it. So a major role of the SU is to foster that positive community spirit within Cambridge, and a lot of that is working with societies and putting on events and that sort of thing. So what would you do in that part of the role to create that positive environment in Cambridge?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a lot to be worked on in fostering that kind of university level community. I think there are structural things we can do to include, like I put on my manifesto, about students on Tier 4 visas who are often neglected within our university system. So those kind of structural changes, but also if you're talking about the SU and their relationship to students, there's also a lot that can be done there. I know the recent SU drop-ins have been really useful in communicating. Having been on the JCR myself and in SU campaigns, I know how useful it can be to have that level of communication with the SU. And so I think there's lots of incredible ways we can do that. And I'd be really keen in having more welfare officer forums as well, because that's a part of the JCR that I think often isn't brought together as closely as things like women's officers are. And that's just a really useful way to foster that kind of community among the student body.
Hi, I just read about the climate justice part of your campaign, and I was wondering specifically about the careers element of that. There's obviously a yearly careers fair, and theoretically we would obviously like to see less fossil fuel companies there. But how do you decide what company is sustainable and what company isn't, and how we should select who should be able to advertise there to basically draw upon some of the brightest minds of the UK?
Yeah, that's an incredibly important question, and one that the student movement focusing on climate issues and climate careers are really thinking about. To begin with, there's a People and Planet list of about 200 suggested career options or companies that we should avoid working with. I think a lot of it comes down to the principles of the university, and when this university refuses to give their money to certain companies through the divestment decisions they've made, etc., it then becomes hypocritical at a point to be advertising those same companies. So I think we have to take that lead and reflect that back to the university. But also, I think it's incredibly important to have a think about generally the exclusions policy within our career service. And I think currently the only companies that are excluded are tobacco and sex work, whereas there's a lot of, like, say, fossil fuel companies and also companies like BAE that fund military powers around the world that our university really shouldn't be advertising. But yeah, it's a difficult one to select exact companies, but I think that comes with consulting with the university and the students who are actually campaigning on this.
So I know one of your manifesto points is kind of around, again, like Porters not cops, and one of them, like things in particular, is changing college reliance and Porters had on mental health crises. And I agree with this. I was wondering how, or who you thought would kind of be best placed to replace kind of, obviously Porters in mental health crises are there for like a lot of out of hours stuff, so who you thought would be best to replace them, or how would you go about,
Yeah, no, thank you so much. That's a good question. I think, so there's a long-term strategy of thinking about the porters that we employ and the kind of de-escalation training and intervention welfare training that isn't given sufficiently to these porters, who are then have a dual role of both protecting but also policing students in a way that's been very uncomfortable for many students in the past. I think the implementation of the wellbeing coordinator that the University Counselling Service is looking at putting in would be a good daytime element to that. I think in the short term, I'm not sure about out of hours situations. I think that's something we have to look quite deeply into about which colleges use which services. But there are lots of incredible campaigns like Counsellors Not Cops, which do amazing things about providing immediate, urgent mental health support to students in a way that isn't policing or disciplining them. So I think, yeah, we can definitely, consult and work it out. I think it's not going to be an immediate switch, but there are definitely things we can start looking at to just shift that over time, hopefully.
Any more questions? I don't believe so. Thank you very much. Okay, I believe that should be all, so please give your closing remarks.
Thank you so much everyone for all those questions. That was really interesting and helped me think a lot about the policies that I wrote about. I really hope that my extended experience in all of these issues and my policies on my manifesto demonstrate that I really do care deeply about the welfare of the students in this university, and I really think that if elected, in collaboration with JCRs and different campaigns, we could really make a difference in fostering a better university for its students and its staff and the community beyond it. Thank you so much.
Once again, a reminder that Ron is a candidate in this election. I'm sure you're all sick of hearing that by now. Next up is the postgraduate presidents. So if you could all make your way over here. Pick a seat.
Hello. It's my first time meeting you.
Would you like to start?
Oh, okay.
Just because you're closer.
Okay, hello everyone. My name's Savannah, pronoun she, her. I'm at Magdalen College doing an MPhil in Philosophy of Science, and I am from Birmingham. My campaign runs on 5 key themes, which is climate, inclusivity, engagement, welfare and finance. Highlights of my manifesto include having a full-time, dedicated, paid climate and LGBTQ+ officers on the officer team, identifying and tackling lack of engagement in student life for postgraduates, increasing visibility and support of student welfare services such as Nightline, which I used to volunteer for, and taking swift action on college financial inequality. Thank you. And just about Savannah. So.
Hi, I'm Amelia. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm running to be your postgraduate president for Cambridge SU. I'm currently your postgraduate access, education and participation officer, postgraduate, and I ran last year with the promise to scrap the £75 application fee for postgraduates, and within a term, I did it. I got the university to commit to scrapping the £75 doctoral fee and reduce the master's fee, which is a huge win. I also ran for more accessible postgrad funding, more PhD support, and better pastoral support for postgraduate students. And while I've been in office, we've launched the postgraduate funding search, making postgraduate funding easier to find. I've made lecture recordings and closed captions more accessible across departments, and have helped review and launch the SU Manifesto for a fossil-free Cambridge. I'm going to skip down because I made this intro way too long. Students deserve better representation from all aspects, and if I'm elected, I will make sure that we have climate justice, including divestment from fossil fuels, fossil-free careers, and mandatory teaching on the climate crisis within all postgraduate courses, increase postgraduate access from offers funding and postgraduate support, better pay for students who supervise. So vote for me to be your next postgraduate president.
Thank you very much, Steve. We have a few pre-submitted questions. So first off, what do you think is the most important issue for postgraduates currently?
Shall I
yes, you start.
Pass it down. So I think that there are a lot of issues that affect postgraduate currently, and it really does depend on whether you are a master's student or a PhD student, because that difference can you face a lot of different issues. For master's students, it's getting on while you get into Cambridge. It's knowing the system and having adequate funding, and just getting and then also getting a career after your master's degree, which would either be through the Cambridge Career Service or elsewhere, or going on to a PhD. And currently this is under-supported, and master's students are treated like cash cows instead of research students or torch students. For PhD students, the problems are far more multifaceted and include issues with inadequate pay for doctoral supervision, and also the need to support themselves by supervising students. The supervising students should be a choice and not a necessity to support themselves. And also that within that, they don't have contracts and they work independently for different colleges, and therefore their welfare is not looked after in this remit. There are a lot of other issues I can speak to, but I'll pass over.
Thanks. Thank you. One big issue I find with postgraduates is a lack of, I don't know if it's a lack of enthusiasm, but a lack of sort of getting involved with things in university. It could be because maybe postgraduates are a bit older and a lot happens in those 3 years when you're doing an undergrad, or just other reasons. But I think it's really important for postgraduates to get more involved on all these stuff on CamFest. No one talks about the postgraduate colleges. Everyone's like, Clare Hall, never heard of it, whereas it's actually one of the most popular postgraduate colleges. I think we need to get them just more involved, more events going on, postgraduates actually feeling like they are at a college rather than just feeling connected to their department, and just feeling like they are a Cambridge student rather than, like you said, a cash cow or something else like that.
Thank you very much. I believe we're going to open to the floor now. So we could have Kate come out, and got one question in the back there.
Thanks.
Sorry, this kind of does apply to one of you more than the other, but I guess we'll stay cool, so that's how it works. I was wondering about the decision to prioritise a LGBT SAB over Class Act SAB, because Class Act is the other liberation campaign which doesn't currently have a full-time special.
Okay, thank you. It's mainly because I think that would be more involved when I come to define the role. So what we could do is, if we decided, we do need a Class Act sabbatical officer and we can source more funding for a Class Act sabbatical officer, then we can change the LGBTQ plus role to a liberation officer, which is what we had at my undergraduate uni Nottingham, whereas both of those things would be included in their remit. The role could end up being adjusted to that anyway. If we get an LGBTQ plus officer and decide that they don't have enough stuff to do to be a full-time role or something, then we can include Class Act things in the definition of their role and just sort of include that and work with it, because of course it would be a pilot of sorts for these roles to see how well they do, to see how the candidates do and how well they work and how good it is for everyone.
Would you like to comment?
Yes, so in theory also supporting the creation of new offices, and I actually did talk about this last year. However, I don't think we should wait for the slow bureaucratic process of finding funding for new offices to take place and creating these offices. We need to tackle these issues now. And as this is why I'm, as a presidential candidate, campaigning strongly for these issues, including more postgraduate access. I did a lot on postgraduate access this year, and I'll continue to, and as well as other things like climate justice, sustainability, increasing LGBTQ plus portfolio. These things need to be addressed now by a president who has a wide portfolio, and of course it's great when and if we get these roles, but we should be doing these now.
Any other questions?
Who are we going for?
Let's go for the one in the by the wall.
As a PhD student, I'm probably in the group that would engage least with the SU. What would you both do to engage PhD students with the Cambridge SU as opposed to just my college graduate common room?
Shall I go first? Okay. So I've already talked a bit about engaging PhD students on the issues they may face, such as inadequate pay for their hours, and that is just one of the things that we can do. But this is a more like political thing, and that while will affect PhD students in the long term and very positively to get better doctoral supervision, get better training for their supervisors to manage the PhD student relationship. Often the work of the SU is maybe under-publicised in this way because Angela and I have been working on it this year. But in terms of a kind of a quicker progression and a better engagement, I very much want to implement a bar and a cafe and a common room for PhD students and postgraduate students in general to engage with the SU, because currently the SU doesn't have a social space for this to happen, and instead we've had to rely on kind of like meeting us at external venues. In my undergraduate, we had an SU where everyone, there was a venue, there was a cafe, there was a gym, and everyone could engage, and that's what I very much want to implement in my next term. So PhD students and other postgraduates have a place to socialise and engage that doesn't have to be their colleges, and therefore can bring more issues to us which are more pertinent and can see the work that we're doing on a policy level to help them.
Okay, so for postgraduate students, there's often this image of them being alone, studying, burning midnight oil and things. And unfortunately for lots of postgraduates, that is the case, particularly on my course where PhD students are literally researching individually on their computer the whole time. And to combat this, the department introduced a group where once a term you get together and talk about your work. Now, this is it's a step, but it's not enough for postgraduates. And I think it's partly because there's such a discrepancy in ages. Perhaps when people come to do PhD study, And I think we need to tackle these issues. We need to work out why postgraduates aren't feeling involved or included. It could be because this isn't their first rodeo. This is their second time at university, and they're maybe getting a bit tired of it all by now, used to it. So it's about freshening things up for postgraduates. Like you said, with the common room and things like that, that could be an option, or we could look at other things, networks. My undergraduate university had a voluntary postgraduate officer, and yeah, things like this that can help postgraduates get that new, fresh, oh, I'm at uni excited feeling that they're probably a bit tired of by the time you come to do a PhD. Thank you.
Next question. Okay, a question back there. Yes, the one in the red jumper.
Yeah, I have to say, I'm pleased that you're both very pro-climate, at least on paper. My question is, how do we move forward from lofty ideals and climate targets to actual change in the university? Because I see you're a dedicated climate officer, which obviously in theory I'm in favour of. But what will he or she do? As in, will there be heat pumps here? Will it be more like veg-fire and like nice virtue signalling without any actual change in the larger scheme of things?
Thank you. I feel quite good about answering this question because my boyfriend was the environmental officer at Nottingham. So what he did during his time was he set up a zero waste shop. He organised a sustainability week that had over 8,000 students involved. The Cambridge equivalent of that, with about half the students, would be about 4,000 students involved in Sustainability Week. Like, can you imagine that at Cambridge? This Sustainability Week was the first of its kind. There were over 65 events happening just over 1 week, and that was just the progress he was able to do in March before COVID hit. And I can imagine that when we come to define a remit for a climate officer, we can look at having them do things like this. There are 31 colleges, over 100 departments, 459 university staff on pay of over £100,000. And because of this, I think there is plenty of stuff to be getting on with, not just making statements, but actually working hard to lobby on things. And I think a climate officer would actually have proper time to be pushing the needle on all these things, working with all these colleges and departments, rather than it just being one thing in a lot of other things you've got to be working on, fingers in all your pies. I'm using a lot of analogies today, but yeah, thank you.
But sorry, could I quickly ask a question connected to this? Because you're basically saying I should work on all these things, but that is a lot, as in that is pretty much impossible for like the whole university to do, let alone one person. What will the climate officer actually focus on? What are the key elements that we ought to focus on to make this university greener?
Okay, thank you. That would be things like they would work with current things that are going on in the Cambridge Climate Justice, so like divestment, demilitarisation, things like that they work in. They do probably, I imagine, a carbon audit of colleges, which I think would be good. They'd look at our stage 3 emissions, which are emissions that we emit without really realising it, so like emissions from buying your food or getting some clothes off ASOS or something. And that's what I imagine they can start with, and then they can work and adapt to the climate crisis and the university. And I think it's a lot for one person, which is exactly why we need a full-time role dedicated to it, to be pushing that forward and focusing, saying, I'm the climate officer. This is what we need to do, leading the climate network. And yeah. Sorry, do you have to answer both of those now? I'm so sorry.
I'll try my best. The initial question, if you could remind me of it, was to keep the how to keep everything accountable, and how we can achieve kind of climate justice and get the university to commit. I have a background in environmental research. I first did it in my master's, and then worked as a research assistant looking at how technology affects the environment. So I know a lot about environment. In terms of getting the university to commit, if you haven't read my manifesto points, these are ones that have been said this year, like getting the university to commit to net zero by 2030, including fossil fuel divestments, fossil-free careers, and also mandatory teaching on the climate crisis to postgraduate students. But then how do we actually do this? How do we get the university to commit? So we already have, it's called the it's called the Environmental Sustainable Strategy Committee, or ESSC. The ESSC is currently a committee in the university, and it exists to do things like carbon offsetting working group. They have an ecological advisory panel and a transport working group. And they have a rather small and backseat role that needs to be expanded to the forefront of decision making. We also have people like Ellen Quigley, who's advisor to the Chief Financial Officer and works at the Centre of Mitigation of Climate Change and Inequality. These are permanent university people, permanent university structures that will exist when the next officer goes. So I want to work to make sure that these committees and these people in the university are empowered and put to the forefront of decision making, and get the when we have the university commitments such as net zero, we need to make sure that these task force and panels are created, put to the forefront, and have a large voice. And we can do that through our roles as SU officers, because we can talk to these committees, we can lobby, lobby higher end working groups and committees and boards to make sure that these people are there. And also in terms of fossil-free careers, it makes sure that we have someone there, like a climate researcher, who is seeing which employers come in and auditing them. Is something that a sabbatical officer may not be able to do year on year, but the sabbatical officer can make sure that infrastructure is in place. And also on the smaller level, and what we can do this year is revamp schemes that started before COVID, like sustainable, making sure Mabels are sustainable, making sure that all colleges all have food waste. I know Pembroke, for example, just put food waste bins in the college housing, which is a new step, to make sure that the green officers are also held accountable, and that there are creations of green officers within colleges as well. So small steps and larger steps with the task force, basically. I think it answers both.
Yeah. I think we only have time for one more question, so I think Amjad had a question first. So.
Hi. So many PhD students supervise, and to that effect, they're also members of the UCU, and they tend to be college supervisors, so they haven't technically gone on strike, but they're becoming increasingly frustrated with the state of precarity that they're in. Inflation is going up, the cost of living is going up, but stipends are frozen, and yet kind of college teaching is akin to being a tutor on a tuition website where you do your 1 hour but you don't get paid for the prep. Training is also not where it is. Sorry, I'm giving a bit of a speech. But you both talk about these, like, furthering these aims, pushing back against casualisation, obtaining contracts, fair pay, but how will you materially work towards these things?
If you could keep it to a minute as well.
That's a great question, and I've sort of addressed it already in terms of the aims of what I'm doing, but I'm going to work with, work with different committees, such as the education committees, to make sure that college supervisors will get recognised contracts, and therefore will get will be part of a proper employee. So making sure that they get proper pay for all the hours they work, making sure that they get training, and making sure that they get a support, for example, a line manager or someone like that, which currently they don't have at all. I also plan on working with UCU for this because, as you said, a lot of members of the university are part of UCU. I was on the picket lines this week and doing breakfast runs as well, and it's just like this is super important. I've started looking at it this year as Access Officer, and it is a really complicated and potentially thorny subject, and I'm not going to speak more than a minute, but we want to get them proper contracts within the university, not just the colleges.
Thank you. For me, I think these college supervisors, they don't have any bargaining chips in this race. They can't go on strike. What we need to do is we need to work out a way where they can actually make their discontent known to the university. They can actually affect the university in a way where they can get the things that they need. So, for example, we should work with different networks, the education network, but I also think this is a lot more of a feminist issue as well, in that a lot of people affected by these are women, people of colour, disabled people, and this is something that we need to look at. And I think if we can push it more as a feminist issue, that will make the uni go, oh, I don't want to be seen as, you know, misogynistic, I better work on that. So I think it's really important that we get these bargaining chips given to the supervisors, empower them. UCU members I've spoken to have said one of the biggest things that they want is student support. We need to drum that up, and by that we need to also push, hey, my college supervisor, they're not getting paid that much. Can you sort that out? Because, you know, I'm paying you money for this and you're not treating, you know, my supervisor well. And yeah, I think those sort of things we can look at, and yeah.
Thank you very much. Could you both just make your closing statements now? And
yeah, shall I go first?
Yes.
Oh, okay, give me a second to flip my page over. Scribbling this out. Okay. Climate action should not be at the whim of SU candidates who are elected each year and who may or may not support vast climate action. The climate crisis is incredibly urgent and demands a full-time paid role across all the colleges, all the hundreds of departments that we've spoken about, and all the staff and students. Another big issue at Cambridge is college financial inequality. So, for example, for postgraduate students at Murray Edwards, there is one £3,000 scholarship available to them. For postgraduate students at Trinity, you can see where this is going, there is over £1 million worth of different scholarships available, and that is at the bare minimum. I calculated this, I went through their website, and that's not including extra hardship bursaries, extra ones they'll give out just because they feel like it. This is ridiculously unfair. And oh, this one just annoys me, okay. Your time at Cambridge should not be determined by whether you can afford to eat, whether you can afford to get the healthcare you need, or to even go to events that all your friends are going to. And that is a lottery that depends on which college you get into, and it shouldn't be like that. This is ridiculous. Finally, an LGBTQ officer, the one that we've been talking about, they can work to make life for LGBTQ plus students feel a lot safer, which I feel is especially pertinent due to the recent homophobic attack that happened to 4 Wolfson College students. And it is, we all utterly condemn this, I hope. I hope you believe in these changes I'd like to make as much as I do, and vote for me, I guess, sorry.
Thank you all for your questions. Please email me if you have any more. A recap of my main priorities are climate justice, including divestment from fossil fuels, fossil-free careers, mandatory teaching based on the climate crisis within postgraduate courses, increased postgraduate access from offers, funding, support during the course. This also includes better pay for students who supervise, funding that is accessible and tied to PhD offers, and also better pastoral support across the board. I've already lobbied and fought on behalf of students and achieved real, tangible wins, and have already made Cambridge University a more accessible place for postgraduates. Vote for me for your postgraduate president.
Thank you very much to you both. Once again, just a reminder that the one named Ron is also a candidate. Thank you very much to you both. If you have any further questions, and I know I wasn't able to get to you all, I'm sure you can contact them by email. CRS IDs should be on their manifestos and such. Right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
The next candidate is our final group of candidates, which is the present undergraduate presidents. So if you can come up, that'd be very much appreciated. Thank you. Do you want to start with that?
Sure.
Keep it to a minute as well, please.
Yes. God, I can't believe you're all still here. You're probably wondering why I still want to be here after a year in this job and do it again. And it's not because, well, it's partly because I don't know if I'm ready for the real world yet, but also because we all know that change in Cambridge is really, really slow and difficult. It's such a complex, structurally sort of federated institution, and making change is just incredibly, incredibly difficult. And part of the reason for that is that the university does rely consciously or subconsciously on the fact that student reps change over every year to block change on the priorities that students really care about and that we desperately need change on. So I really want to run again to break that cycle. There are a few key priorities. I think people know where I stand broadly on the issues, and I'll keep fighting on more issues than can fill a 500-word manifesto. But in terms of my priorities, I really want to laser focus on some of the key things that I know students care massively about. So delivering the reading week is a huge priority. It's at a really crucial stage. I want to keep the momentum up. I've got lots of context already built up around that issue, and I want to push it over the line. We need to open the SU up more to students and make it more of an accessible student-led space by introducing an SU cafe and bar, and I want to push for a fairer, more ethical Cambridge and a fossil-free university. Thank you. Sorry, that wasn't me.
Hi everyone, I'm Zainab. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm your current Access, Education and Participation Officer. I'm now going up against this one to be your undergraduate president. I think Zach's really articulately said why we're both rerunning, but I think for me, coming from the education side of things, a lot of the barriers that I've found in the work that I'm doing are because the college system works against us a lot of the time, and I want to be able to sit in the spaces as your president to fight the colleges on issues such as implementing more training for supervisors, and I've loved my work and I just want to continue doing it and make it grow. A big priority for me is improving SU engagement. We're here to support and empower you, and the only way that we can do this is through talking to you as students directly and making this easier to do. Obviously, I'm a huge proponent of the Reading Week, and as your president, I would inherit that work and that project. But the university have also said that the root of the problem is workloads, and I want to hold them accountable to that and actually reevaluate student workloads. I'm also really keen to be working on student welfare, making sure that there is adequate and real training for pastoral tutors, because a lot of them aren't trained at all. And my last point is about decolonisation. Obviously, Zach and I have both been working on this year. I'm really excited to say that I think the decolonisation hub will be done and set up by the end of my term, whether I get re-elected or not. But I would love to work with student campaigners to continue that work and create a manifesto for a decolonised Cambridge and begin campaigning on that as your president. That was a whistle-stop tour of my manifesto, so I'm going to stop, but thanks.
Thank you very much for your points. Our first question is, what will you do to make sure Shielding and other higher students are able to study remotely or get other adjustments that they need in the coming year? Do you want to start then?
Yeah. I'm really proud to say that through my lobbying and pestering of certain senior members of the university, there has been commitment by the university to continue provision of lecture recordings. I'm really, really excited about that, and I'm keen to continue pushing that work and making sure that it actually happens. I think continuing lecture provision is going to be a huge provision of lecture recordings, is going to be a huge thing for making sure that our education is more accessible at the university. And I'm also really excited to be campaigning on implementing closed captioning alongside that.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I think we all know that disabled students have been asking for more flexibility around how they study for years, and then it wasn't possible until the pandemic meant that it had to be possible for everyone. We need to keep all of those really good provisions, but we also need to push further. And I think part of the reason why I want to run again is because that summer period for new sabbatical officers is often one where you're just kind of completely finding the, getting to know the ropes. And so it's hard to do a lot of kind of proactive planning around policy. And one thing that confronted us quite sharply at the start of our terms was residency requirements and how intransigent the university was around having any flexibility for what is a minority but an important minority of students who want flexibility. So over this summer, if I was able to kind of hit the ground running a bit more, that's something that I would try and lobby on consistently from the beginning, rather than when the university's kind of already made its position very clear. And I think that kind of applies to lots of different issues, but this is obviously a critically important one.
Thank you very much to you both. The next question is, in your current role as SABs, what have you done to effectively and meaningfully improve student experience at the university, and what would you do to improve upon that? Do you want to start with that?
Sure. So there's kind of, I sort of see my work as there are some things you can do that are quick and immediate, and that's what I think you can do in often in one term. It's easier to, things like pushing for the SU to provide financing to distribute 2,500 drink spiking covers, helping a big project move along another stage. So with the Reading Week, I inherited it at a certain stage, but I helped write a proposal. I've helped the university do a consultation on that proposal, and now we're in this final stage where we need to take the responses that we got to that consultation and create a finished proposal and ensure that the university actually accepts it. Obviously, the climate crisis is something that students feel incredibly deeply, and that's something that I hope I've been a good champion for in terms of the university adopting bold climate action. The university's Environment Committee has recommended that the university goes for a 2030 net zero target, which is a pretty big change, and I know it's something students care a lot about. And I guess part of the reason why I'm running again is so that I can not only do those kind of more reactive things like with the drink spiking covers, but also push for the deeper sorts of changes which do take more than a year a lot of the time, especially when it takes a long time to get to grips with the complexity of the university.
So one of my biggest wins this year has been a commitment from the Cambridge Admissions Office to provide funding for the SU for student-led access work schemes. There are so many amazing initiatives that are happening, but they're wildly unsupported, and I'm really glad that we've got that funding and we'll be able to offer that to students. I think building off of that, student societies are doing some incredible work, but moving on from the pandemic, trying to run more events, whether that's in person or online, has been really, really difficult, and so I push for more funding from the university for those societies. On the more academic side of things, I know UCU has been touched on a lot today, particularly with the ongoing strikes, and I think that members of UCU are not treated fairly by this university, and their poor working conditions constantly affect students' learning conditions and the quality of feedback that they get, the quality of supervision, because supervisors don't have the time to prep. So I would work really closely with the UCU and the postgraduate officers to bring an end to the UCU disputes, because university management is not doing enough for them.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to one more question that was submitted in advance, and then we'll move to the floor. How would you tackle institutional racism at Cambridge?
That's a big one, isn't it? I think a big thing is having more and better and mandatory paid training for supervisors, for student-facing staff. It's something that I've been working on this year, and the barrier that I've come up again and again with is that colleges are the issue. So I want to be able to build relationships with them through committees like the Senior Tutors Committee, which is what the President sits on, to actually get that implemented. And I think it would come through working with UCU, because UCU are on exactly the same page as me with this. They really want that training, and it's just not provided for them. Obviously that's kind of a start point. It's not the end goal, but it's more than the university is offering now.
Yeah, I fully agree that it's long past time that we had really robust anti-racism training that all staff members undertook, and that training was actually informed by the experiences of students of colour on the ground, so informed by what it's like to walk into Cambridge as a student of colour, to find objects in the museums which communities in the Global South have repeatedly been asking back for, and being denied, to study curriculums which are overwhelmingly white, to be denied the opportunity to study particular topics because there are no experts in that topic, when somehow we have 12 different John Locke experts. And I think obviously this ties in the same with sexual misconduct processes, but our processes for dealing with complaints are really inadequate. They aren't centred enough around students' own welfare, which makes it, I mean, Tara's been doing a load of amazing work, and then around encouraging students to report, they've also been focusing on, and I fully agree with the need to ensure that when those students do report, they have a process and a system which believes them and supports them through that. So it's a huge task spanning, institutional racism spans so many areas, and our response to it has to span all of those areas as well. So that's sort of just an outline of some of the things I would look at.
Okay, now we've got the floor. We haven't got much time, but let's go right to the back. How do you get
The person in blue. The person in blue.
Person blue, yeah.
I was wondering, obviously there's not, with the Reading Week proposals, what are your thoughts on Saturday lectures in the STEM subjects? Because I think this is something that a lot of people, especially STEM students, feel are missing from the current proposals. And even though I know a lot of the thoughts are just to scrap them all together, they're just physically in the timetable is not enough space to do so. And how would you fit this into your ideas about mitigating workloads and things like that?
Sorry, we might just leave that question till later for the sake of the Reading Week debate, if that's all right. Other questions? Let's go, Roma.
Hi there. So in previous years there have been many more candidates for undergraduate president than we have now, and candidates who are not already sabbatical officers. I wondered, there's a few questions wrapped into one here, but I wondered if you could speculate on why that might be, and also both you talked about engaging students more in the SU, but I wonder if this is reflective of the fact that over the course of this last year, where you've been sabbatical officers, that students are not more engaged in the SU from what you've already done, given there aren't any students who aren't sabbatical officers running for undergraduate president. So yeah, I want to get your thoughts on that and how you would ensure that students that you are remaining engaged with students, given that it's now over a year since it will have been over a year since you've been a student, and how students can remain engaged with the SU.
Sure, I think that's an incredibly fair question, and I mean, I have been trying really hard this year to increase the approachability of the sabbatical officer team. So one of my big initiatives was pushing for us to do our video updates, which sounds like a small thing, but I just want people to know that we're human beings that speak as well as, rather than just kind of writing quick updates that no one reads. Also the coffee and cake drop-ins, which have been a really nice sort of, I hope, more accessible and informal way to get to know us and talk to us about what students want from the SU. I think we should be in a situation where every single role in an SU election is hotly contested, and there shouldn't be any complacency around that, and it's not good enough that that's not the case this year. And that's, I mean, a big reason why, again, I think it's good to be here for 2 years, because once you're inside the SU, you can see its problems. I mean, students can also tell the problems, but one thing obviously I've realised is that there needs to be much more engagement, and we have to meet students where they're at, not just expect them to desperately want to turn up to SU Council on a Monday evening, but also provide them fun spaces. So that's why an SU cafe and bar just seems like a no-brainer, because it means that it's not just like a hyper-political slice of the student population that gets involved, it's also a space that everyone can be involved in. And yeah, I very much hope that if I'm re-elected, there will be a hotly contested race for this role next year.
Yeah, I think that was a really good question, Roma, and I think definitely a lot of the kind of fun stuff that we do can be a really quick and easy way for students to get involved in. As AEP, I ran the shadowing scheme and we had 400 students sign up for that, and despite, having some real challenges with moving online during kind of the government's move to Plan B, we still had 100 students stay on as mentors, and that was incredible, and they were all so engaged and so lovely, and that's kind of contributing to the work that we do, but also giving them an opportunity to see it more clearly. I think I'm going to counter what you said about student council, because I think it's really important. People complain that they don't know what the SU does, and arbitrarily we seem to make these decisions. So I think for me, of course I want the SU bar, of course I want spaces for students to come and feel like they belong within the university and not just within their college, but also understanding how we work, why we make decisions that we do, and how they can actually get involved with that is really important to me. So I'm definitely going to be reaching out to JNMCR reps, school reps, campaign leads, and making sure that they understand the role of council and they feel supported to engage with council themselves and also feed that work back to their peers. Yeah.
I'm afraid I've only really got time for one more question, so I think we'll go to Peter.
Yeah, this is quite simple. You called a referendum for the reading week. You've both stood on a manifesto that nonetheless involves reading week. What happens if the reading week manifesto fails? How does that affect your standing within the university? Does that mean the university takes you less seriously?
You're really out here asking big questions today. I've deliberately chosen not to put the reading week on my manifesto because I don't know what the outcome of the referendum will be. Of course, I'm such a huge, I cannot, it's going to come up later. I'm not going to say all of the reasons why I think it's necessary and why I think we should have a reading week. But, if the university is going to say that the big issue is workloads and we shouldn't have a reading week, I'm going to hold them accountable to that, and I'm going to say, well, if you're saying you want to reduce workloads, you actually have to commit to that now. And I don't think the loss will mean that the university necessarily takes us less seriously, because we do so much other big and important work. I mentioned the shadowing scheme before. We were doing access work long before it was, the cool and hip thing for universities to do, and we'll continue to be innovators because that's what SUs are there for. I'm going to stop talking now.
I think what I think the university should take us seriously as is a vehicle for channeling student power and student opinion. If it turns out that the majority of students vote against the reading week, then we as student representatives have to take that seriously and adjust our approach. I hope that we understand the student population enough to be pretty confident that we're going to get a strong yes result, which I really hope, even if you don't vote for me, please vote yes for the reading week, because my God, we need one. But we can't be pushing our own personal agendas. We have to be honest about our principles and channel what students tell us very clearly that they want. Up until now, they've told us this. And part of the reason for calling the referendum is because the university seems intent on telling students the best way to solve their stress and well-being problems, rather than letting students who live and breathe Cambridge terms actually determine and tell them what they think would help. Obviously, students are aware that workload is a sort of separate issue, but massively interconnected with the term structure. So the reading week referendum is intended to use the power that the SU has to organise a referendum and conduct democratic processes to reaffirm publicly that commitment, whilst the sabbatical officers can simultaneously be doing the kind of behind the scenes lobbying senior tutors, talking to various stakeholders in the university, writing the revised proposal, and then hopefully there can be a kind of pincer effect where this long overdue change happens.
Thank you both. I think we're going to take closing statements now. So, do you want to start?
Yeah, thank you so much everyone for coming and making it to this very nearly final part of the evening. I really, really care about getting things done for students. I desperately want to make changes on the key priorities that I know are really important to people who study at this university. The reading week needs consistency and someone who's already understands the proposal and knows the key players and can push it over the line. It's such a make or break next sort of 6 to 10 months around this proposal, and I just really want to see it through if it kills me. I also really have got a sense this year of some of the amazing things that the SU does that we need to highlight more, but also some of the things that we really need to change in terms of how it's perceived, how many people want to engage with it. There's a lot that we can do, and obviously one of the flagship things around that is introducing a communal space that people can come to without having to attend a meeting, important though those are. And I want to continue fighting for a university that treats its community, its workers, the world that it exists in and impacts in a just and fair way. And I hope I've proven that I will fight for that in relation to climate justice, in relation to student welfare, in relation to disparities, in relation to anti-racism, and I just think these fights can be hopefully helped along much more by someone who's had a year to kind of understand the systems. So I really hope people will consider voting for me. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks everyone so much for your questions. I hope throughout the year I've proved that I am a sabbatical officer who cares and who can deliver. You can ask me more about the work that I've done and achieved so far. I am dedicated to more frequent, accessible and meaningful student engagement and collaboration. That's present throughout my manifesto, for example, with like working with decolonisation campaigners. And I really am pleased to say that I want to take a holistic approach to my presidency. I would be building on the work that I've done as AEP to continue with access and education things, but also looking more at things like decol, student support, student welfare, and I know the ins and outs of the SU now, so I know how we can be doing this work and where we need to improve. I'm keen to be a president that works with you and connects you as students to the university, and I'll ensure that you have a voice in your education, your welfare and your social experience. So bridge the gap, vote Zainab for your undergraduate president.
Thank you today. Once again, I must remind you that Ron is a candidate, and that's the last time we'll be saying that this evening. Sorry we can't get to all you couldn't get to all your questions. I do once again encourage you to email both of them if you've got a question that's left unanswered. We'll take a short break now. I think it'll be a bit shorter, maybe 5-10 minutes, and then we'll come back for the Reading Week debate. We have failed to actually find anyone to speak for the No campaign, despite quite a significant amount of effort. If anyone here would like to speak for the No campaign, you are please come up to one of us and let us know, and we'd be quite happy to have you speak. I think that is all for now.
god-awful introduction now.
Just do a different god-awful.
You significantly overestimate my imaginative capacity. Like, you've suffered through council for the last year.
Yeah.
You know how bad it gets.
Not anymore.
At least I'm not currently wearing 2 pairs of glasses.
Who is?
Usually me.
Really?
Someone hasn't noticed.
I never noticed. Okay. We go.
Alright.
Yep. Okay then, let's move on to the part of the evening that I'm sure you have all been waiting for, in which case you'll need to get a hobby. The Reading Week debate. So as Caredig has already let us know, we haven't actually managed to find a representative from the No campaign to show up this evening, and God only knows not for lack of trying. Their official campaign representative, I can't remember the reason off the top of my head, can't be here, but we do have Tara here from the Yes campaign. Definitely not a biased room, definitely not. So if you'd like to take your minute to introduce yourself for the campaign, please go ahead.
Hello, I'm Tara Chowdhury. I'm the BME officer at the Students' Union, pronouns she, her, and I'll be speaking in favour of implementing a reading week in this referendum. So I think the fact that no one's actually here to speak against it says quite a lot about how students feel about the reading week. I know people might have seen, a few comments on CamFest and on forums like that, and I think if anything, that speaks to how well the campaign's done in making the issue something that all students know about and care about, and the fact we're getting into those kind of granular details about how it's going to be implemented really shows the kind of late stage we're at with this campaign. This has been something that's been in the works now for a few years. We've got the university on side enough to have had a working group set up, and we're really now at a point where this is make or break for the Reading Week campaign, and I'd really encourage people to say yes for the sake of mental health of students, for academic enrichment, and just to give us a chance to actually get involved in all of the extracurricular activities that are available for students at the university that, as we all know, because we're all here, you don't really get the time to do any of that. I don't know if anyone saw my post on Facebook about my time at Cambridge, but I definitely had a pretty rough time. I'll be coming back to do my final year next year, so I'll be one of the people making sure that SU is held to account on implementing the Reading Week, so don't worry about that. But a lot of people, such as myself, really struggled with mental health, and just the idea of having a break to have some breathing space, maybe visit home, maybe catch up on some work, or maybe just literally have a good cry and not feel bad about it and feel more stressed about all the work you're missing out on is so needed and is going to be such an instrumental change. That's a little introduction, but I'm very happy to take more questions given there's no one to debate against it.
Yeah, I think debate is a strong word for what's going to go on here.
Yeah.
And I think between us, we may come close to holding the record for most intermissions in the same room, which, make of that what you will. So a couple of pre-submitted questions and then we'll open up to the floor. So the one that springs out at me is, can we actually trust that the university would comprehensively make sure students were not set work during Reading Week? Because we know what they're like.
Yeah, I think that's obviously a fair question. It's a question that I think underpins a lot of the other questions people have had about the Reading Week. It's this total lack of faith in the university to take student welfare seriously, and obviously as a sabbatical officer I understand that more than most people. My faith in this university is very low. It's my job to hold the university to account, and I have seen them mess up on a lot of things. Trust me, I'm getting to a positive point on this, I swear. So yeah, I get where people's concern comes from, but I'd say don't allow yourself to be limited in what we can achieve if people actually get behind something. This Reading Week proposal has been in the works for a few years now, and we're at a point now where the university itself actually realises that for the welfare of students and for the kind of longevity of this to be a place where people want to come and study, something drastically needs to change. the fact that Graham Virgo and Alice Benson are both on side with the Reading Week is huge. You know, this isn't a campaign that we've just thought up last week and we're saying, oh, come on, students, let's hold a referendum, come on, get behind it. This is a campaign now that the university are actually behind. We just need that stronger student voice to help push it over the lines at college and department level. So I get why people might have that cynicism towards the university on a lot of issues, but I can really say this is not one where you need to be having that cynicism. This is something where we absolutely do need to be working together as staff and students for the welfare of staff and students. You know, this won't just benefit students. So yeah, I think one of the main things that the university have agreed to implement is actually a reporting system. So if work is being set outside and within the Reading Week, there's going to be a robust mechanism to report that and to stop that from happening. And to be honest, I don't know if I'd be as on board with the Reading Week if it wasn't for something like that being set up, because we know that like individually and stuff like that, having that balance between work and life, having that work-life balance is something that a lot of staff kind of struggle with and a lot of students struggle with. So to have a system where we can actually report that and that's going to be managed by the central university, I think is going to be key. And there's obviously going to be that transition period, I think. I'm under no illusion, and I don't think anyone on the Yes campaign is under any illusion that it's going to be like a light switch moment, you know, like everything's going to be smooth sailing. There might be a few issues, but that's why we've got that system in place. And I think, you know, those bumps in the roads have been accounted for, and after a few years, you know, smooth sailing, we've got a Reading Week, people can chill out.
And a response from the No campaign. Seriously? No, I manifested them. As you can tell by their overwhelming enthusiasm. Okay, questions from the floor. Joshua.
No. How would the Reading Week affect Saturday lectures?
Yeah, I think the fact that this is a question that keeps coming up actually, again, speaks to how strong this proposal is, because it won't affect Saturday lectures. It won't affect Saturday lectures, everyone. It will not affect Saturday lectures. Like, yeah, woo, like it's great. But it won't affect Saturday lectures, and the reason it won't affect Saturday lectures is because of, you know, continuous consultation that we've done with the student body on this one. I think anyone who wants a proposal that's going to be as kind of revolutionary and significant as this one, they have to be behind listening to students, listening to feedback, and I think that's something that's been done really well actually. And I think through having those kind of consultation groups and sessions with NatSkis and with people, you know, we are a humanities dominated SU. I don't think anyone can lie about that. It's true, but that's why we've had to work extra hard to make sure that the views of NatSkis are listened to. They told us they wanted to keep him, so we've kept it. There's going to be a 5-day break from Monday to Friday. Saturday lectures will not be affected. And I think if the kind of only main reasons that people are against the Reading Week come down to misinformation, that speaks to how strong the campaign is, because that's not a real issue that's actually going to happen. That's a separate conversation.
Thank you. Was your hand up as well, Peter?
Yes.
Okay.
I shouldn't have been about
Yeah.
to It's dangerous.
Mistakes were made.
Thank you. Yes, I'm kind of tempted to ask a question like, why is the Reading Week so great and why is everyone involved so attractive?
10-step skincare routine.
I think like the main question that I get a lot of sort of feedback on is basically at the negotiation level, right? Even if the SU is very strongly advocating for stuff like Saturday lectures won't be affected, it's not going to affect workloads, it's not, how are you going to ensure, or well not you personally, but the next generation of SABs, how are they going to ensure that the university will actually keep to those things? How will they ensure that the university is going to actually give the SU what it wants in negotiation?
Okay, thank you. No, that's a good question. I think just the fact that, like, aside from Ron perhaps winning, so obviously that's a thing that could happen hypothetically. The fact that the two candidates for presidents are both people that are in the SU already, and kind of I think it was mentioned in someone's manifesto about the fact that the university relies on that turnover a lot to kind of prevent change from happening. You know, we won't actually have that this time round. You know, there's pros and cons to people rerunning that have already stood in the SU, and that was covered earlier on in the debate, but I think this is a massive pro. The fact that we've got two people that have been working on the proposal so far, sat at the same negotiation tables, they're already familiar with what makes university tick and what doesn't and what isn't going to work. And I think, again, we're at a time of massive change at the university. I think this isn't just happening now because, you know, someone's just pulled this out randomly. There's already so many changes that are going on at the university that are making them more receptive to actually, like, sitting down at the table and listening on this referendum. I think, again, this is the reason why we're doing the referendum. This student referendum isn't, are we going to implement the reading week or not? Like, as your question alludes to, this is, is there a strong enough student voice and support to make this happen? And I think if we show them that there is a strong enough student voice and people vote yes, you know, it's a gamble doing a referendum like this always, right? Like, again, that was alluded to earlier on in the debate, but, like, if this backfires, then it backfires. But taking that gamble is going to make the university listen, because once they've seen that students are overwhelmingly supportive of us, we've got not just a few people in a negotiating room, but we've got the whole student body behind us. And I think that we actually can't understate how powerful that is when there's already been so much progress with this proposal. We're quite far down the line now with this one. We just need that last little push to the college and departments level. The Central University is actually supportive of this, and they understand how necessary this is for the welfare of students. And I think as well, with the strategic review of mental health that's happening, massive institutional overhauls and changes to the way this university functions that wouldn't have even been seen as possible maybe, you know, 5-10 years ago. Those things are changing now, so something as, like, daunting and huge as a reading week actually is a lot more possible than it might seem from the outside. And I think it's really important and instrumental that this reading week is part of those changes towards improving mental health at the university. And the fact that the university recognises that as well, I think, makes our job a lot easier, and a lot easier than it could have been in a lot of years. So yeah, I really have to stress the time is now, because we might not get such an opportune moment again, and I just absolutely don't want us to take it for granted.
Who's ever heard of a referendum backfiring? Any further questions from... Oh, Zach is, like, holding his head in his hands right now. Definitely not got a lot riding on this at all. Any further questions from the floor, or what remains of the floor at this time of night? Lily?
Hi, I was just wondering if you could, like, maybe talk a bit about, like, if there'll be any expectation on, like, JCRs and MCRs to kind of, like, organise things within Reading Week, like, as in, like, will it be a complete break from Cambridge Live, like, yeah, like, what kind of vibe is the sort of, like, social life giving, and, like, yeah, sorry, yeah.
Your question is, what is the Reading Week giving? I think it's giving opportunities, not expectations. So I think for JCRs and MCRs, what it's giving is an opportunity to put on more events for students, but also for students to actually have the time to attend all of the amazing things that JCRs and MCRs work on. There's so many events that I've been like, oh my gosh, yeah, I'd absolutely love to go, like open karaoke night, I'm there. But then when you've got, like, 3 deadlines, you can't even go. So I get, like, so in some of our consultation sessions, you know, there was a few worries about, like, oh, will we be expected to, you know, kind of put on events for students then? Like, that's not the problem. The problem with the way Cambridge works is not there's a lack of extracurricular activities for students. The problem is there's no time for people to actually go and enjoy all of the things that exist. You know, we live in a society. We live in, like, I really distracted myself on that one. We actually live in an environment that's quite unique. Not so many universities have as many societies as we have. I think we're, like, quite famous for having so many societies. I think if you go to Freshers' Fair, you'll see, you know, like, literally hundreds of societies represented. Maybe not physically at Freshers' Fair, but, like, I don't know, maybe. I think maybe there's over 100. Yeah, I'm getting some nods. Okay. There's a lot of societies basically at Cambridge, is the point that I'm trying to make, more so than at most universities. But then you actually exist in Cambridge, and you don't get the opportunities to do that, to engage in any of them. Like, I'd like to go to like Quidditch Shock maybe. Can I do that? Can I find? Yeah, maybe I do. Do I get the time to actually go to Quidditch Shock? No. I know a lot of people feel the same. So the big point that I'm trying to get to is there will be no expectations on JCRs or MCRs to implement events during reading week. However, students might have more time to go to the events that JCRs and MCRs currently run.
Took me a while, didn't it?
Have we got a Quidditch sock rep here that I don't know about? Casual plug. Okay,
yeah, that was a plug. So.
Yeah, we've probably got time for one more question. Yeah, Roman?
I zoned out halfway through, so please tell me if I'm... I zoned out halfway through, so please tell me if I'm repeating the questions from the asked. But the biggest argument and most compelling argument for no that I've seen is from students worried about how, while the proposal for a reading week won't necessarily extend licence periods beyond the current normal 10 weeks, this does force you to lose those times at the beginning and end of term that you would be able to maybe relax. And for international students in particular, having only very narrow windows in which you could stick to termly dates and get flights to and from Cambridge without missing teaching time. And so, yeah, I wondered what your thoughts were on that, basically.
Yeah, no, I think, to be honest, I don't think the reading week proposal will have a negative impact on the issue that you mentioned about about international students. That is a much deeper and more pervasive issue that colleges need to be doing more to counter, because that's to do with how inflexible they are with residency requirements and then the lack of support they are offering international students. That is an issue that desperately needs to be tackled, and we're not actually shortening the residency requirements that are currently in place. We're playing around with the dates of it, do you know what I mean?
But the current residency requirements aren't for the full 10 weeks, and so currently students who need to fly home could do so on the Tuesday after their residency starts, and then a few days early at the end, because they've got able to get flights on those days also, without not meeting residency requirements, but still within the time allowed for their colleges. Now, if we extend the Cambridge term by a week, and that pushes teaching all the way to the end of the college termly licence dates, then that student only has 1 day to get out.
Yeah, okay, so we'll still obviously have the weekend at the end of that term structure, but yeah, I understand that's not gonna solve the point you're on about there. I think that this isn't, like I said, I think that anything with a reading week isn't going to solve absolutely every issue. I think the issue that you're talking about is an issue that the SU needs to do more work on, and that's how colleges support international students, and how, I mean, this is something that, again, like, COVID has really highlighted, and it's highlighted the lack of support for international students and the inflexibility about residency requirements more broadly. The reading week was never intended to solve that problem, but it absolutely is work that needs to be done. So yeah, no, I take your point on that, and I think it's something where like further consultation with specific groups such as international students will be required to really kind of hash out the details on that. I know that's work that's been started, but the technicalities of residency requirements are going to have to, we have to make sure that there's kind of like robust measures to make sure that international students aren't disadvantaged by that. But yeah, I do want to repeat, I think that's work that colleges should be going above and beyond to be making sure isn't an issue in the first place.
I think also that, because my question is not really just about international students and that specific issue, that's just an example of it, but in the idea, if you look at the proposal, the term then ends right at that very end of a 10-week licence period, which I think people have talked about, that concentrating work at the end. People often push supervisions beyond the end of term, and some of that might be mitigated by having that reading week, but not all of it will. I think putting a lot of pressure on students just to get all of that work crammed in at the end without having that extra week after where they've got a termly licence is significant.
But they will have that week as a reading week. Do you know what I mean? Like the time, the days where they would have, usually done that will have been put as a reading week. I get your point, and I know a lot of people will still want to stick around in Cambridge. Like we're not actually stopping that from happening. I know a lot of people pay extra rent at their colleges to,
that is an issue of needing to pay that extra rent to get those days at the end of term where there isn't any work and there isn't even any work coming up.
aware currently they wouldn't have to pay that.
Do you want to go?
No, it's reading week. I think that the reading this is a negative impact of the reading week that is there.
Yeah.
Not that is, but that the benefits are more important. I just think that this is a genuine negative of the reading week.
Yeah, absolutely. Like with any proposal, there are absolutely going to be negatives, and thank you for highlighting that. But you know, like we're not going to find a proposal that absolutely sorts every single element of a lot of things that are wrong with Cambridge. And I think ultimately, this is about finding a solution that will allow people to not be forced into mission. Like for me, well, one of the main reasons I support, you know, Charlie made a joke about it earlier, but one of the main reasons I support the reading week is because at the moment intermission is kind of treated as a solution for a problem that runs a lot deeper, and that is the problem that we're trying to address with this reading week. We're trying to address not workload itself, but how workload is distributed. That is something that we're not going to get a better solution to. This proposal is it, that this is what we need to do. It's about how we distribute workload, how we tackle that culture of intensity at Cambridge. There's going to be certain details that we absolutely will need to iron out, but there's also going to have to be compromises. And I think ultimately, for the sake of students' mental health, we've heard time and time again, people need a break, people need to pause and relax and stop in the middle of term, not at the end, not at the beginning, but in the middle. And yeah, there's certain things we do need to work out of it, but I think trying to find a solution that's going to fit like absolutely everyone's like comments here and there is going to be impossible, but we'll do our best. And we've always been as receptive to feedback as possible, and I think that's shown by stuff like scrapping Saturday lectures and stuff. Like this is at the stage now where we do just need to be like, okay, people support it, great, let's go, let's push it. So yeah.
Just we need to get out of the room soon. So just in terms of finishing up the debate.
Okay. Debate is still an interesting choice of words. Okay, in which case, if you'd like to take your final minute to summarise, close up.
Yeah, so I think what I said then about burnout and kind of tackling that culture is kind of the heart of the issue that we're trying to solve with the reading week. I've had kind of too many times during my degree that I wish I could have just paused, gone home, take a minute to reset, and then come back and give my all to my degree. I think this institution has to be an academically rigorous one, and that's one thing where we're not trying to take away. This isn't a workload issue. This is entirely an issue about making sure students can get the most out of their time here, and you can only get the most out of your time here if you are in your best mental state and if you're actually just given the tools you need to succeed. And currently, the way things are, you arrive, you're here for 8 weeks, you've basically got blinkers on to the outside world, all that matters is getting your degree, and then you go and you don't really have the time to experience this beautiful place and to visit people, visit your friends, visit your family, and that absolutely has to change. So many other universities have a reading week. It seems like such a massive thing to implement and like such a big deal, and I think we're also used to so many weird Cambridge traditions and archaic things, and I think we all in a way sometimes kind of romanticize that and romanticize the intensity here, but reducing that intensity doesn't have to come at the cost of academic rigor. We can still have challenging degrees that push us without pushing us to the point of insanity sometimes, to be quite honest, and intermission. I didn't need to take a year out. The term just needed to be restructured so I could actually have a break and look after my mental health for a couple of weeks. And I think the response to the post I put out where I have a little picture of me ugly crying when things got so bad one year, I think the response to that was crazy, and so many people got in touch with me to be like, I had no idea other people felt like this. I thought this was me and everyone else was this perfect Cambridge model student. And I was like, look around, like everyone actually does really struggle with the way this term is structured. What are we going to do about it? And this is the proposal. So vote yes, let's change something, have a break, have a reading week. Thank you.
a reminder that voting no is also an option. In which case, ladies, gentlemen and assorted cryptids, I'm calling it a day. If you haven't signed in, why not? It's 9:15. Please do so on your way out. Thank you all for surviving until this stage in the evening. Sod off.